Yesterday, we talked about convergence of multiple technologies, innovations to create a perfect environment, a perfect virtual reality like the picture of Mona Lisa on a two-dimensional surface, but with a realistic look. And we took that to the concept of creating a virtual digital twin of a process plant where you can have visibility to how the process is running. In essence, I'll repeat what I said the other day. If you are running a modern industrial process, pipeline, power, whatever that facility might be, and you do not have a digital representation of your equipment, of your people, and your process, you don't have the complete picture. And before you can manage a process well, you must have the complete picture. So to that end, that complete picture gives you insights that we never were able to see before, new horizons to come with IoT and analytics that run on top of IoT. I hope you've had a chance to visit the demo centers, look at PAS solutions, as well as our partners' products to see what's available today. I am going to ask the panelists to come up here and join me. I don't have introduction for everyone. I'm going to do a quick, I think most have been introduced except for Julie. Stan, will you come up here? I think you have been up and you have given spoke. Julie, please join us up here. Julie is, I'm going to mess this up. She's an engineer. She's a manager, director at Southern Company, and she's responsible for cybersecurity at Southern. Enough? That's enough. Okay. Chad, please join us. Chad has controls background and is also responsible for cybersecurity at Chemours. Aidan, say a couple of words about yourself.
Yep, Aidan Hollier from Newcrest Mining in Australia. So I'm the Superintendent of Operational Technology. So I look after controls and security and the whole lot.
Fantastic. Todd?
My name is Todd Gillespie. I work for the Bahrain Petroleum Company, BOPCO. I'm an operations leader, currently heading up an alarm management plan.
That's so much easier when they do it. All right, please go ahead and be seated. We're going to go ahead and get started. This is going to be an interesting conversation because what I have up here is experts in the areas of safety and operations, like Todd, and security experts like Chad, and of course, Julie. Let me go ahead and jump right into it. We're going to try and get through the questions so we'll have questions from the audience. That's where the fun comes. I'll start with, in your view, are safety and security related? Let me start with you, Julie.
Sure. Well, absolutely. From a safety standpoint, looking at the utility industry and specifically our company, and we look at the history of safety. Safety's been around for, I think most of you heard Harvey this morning, 30 years we've been at it. And it's changed and it's evolved over that time. But it's focusing on the original concept of it. It was focusing on more the action and the recordable, et cetera. Well, through metrics and through observation, we've really changed our safety focus to be more that of observation safety. It's more of a proactive look at it. And from a process standpoint, when you look at safety, we are ever evolving and ever changing with our focus on safety of the employee and safety of the equipment, and ultimately the reliability of the transmission and generation. Well, follow that up with cyber. Cyber has taken the exact same path, if you will. Our initial focuses on cyber were really more that of an incident and really that focus of that action or what happened. But really, as we have developed and become more mature in looking at the proactive aspects of that and becoming to look at it more from a leading deliverables and from a metric standpoint, we're able to look at that and begin to culturally bring cyber into that same space as safety. It is a culture. It is something that's ever evolving and ever changing. And it's something that has to be driven from really the core foundation forward. So from a are they the same? They're different, but they have to follow the same path. They have to be ever evolving. And really, again, from a cyber standpoint, we're following that same path of initially it was an action, and now we're looking at how can we be more proactive and preventative to it.
So let me just, on top of that, just follow-up question, and maybe direct it to you, Chad. There is a long history of safety in every company I've been at, and it is something to be really proud of. We've come a long way from that standpoint. In fact, when you walk into any process plant today, one thing that you see is our aim is 0 accidents, 0 safety accidents, and then there is recordables that are posted, number of hours since the last incident. That took a while to gain traction in the market, in the industry. Where do you see security in that context? Does it make sense for security to follow the same track?
I definitely think so. I think it's just another dimension of safety. You know, it's something that, you know, it's taken some time to understand. But, you know, our prior company, DuPont, years ago when they first started manufacturing gunpowder, you know, they didn't understand the hazards of static electricity at first, but they quickly figured that out and started a safety program. So I think it's just a matter of, you know, unfortunately, you know, and luckily we haven't seen, you know, as much impact with cybersecurity incidents within the control system industry, but I think as we see it, it's going to become more and more prevalent, and I think it's just a matter of time before it's recognized. It's just another dimension of safety, and that's how we're approaching it. We're trying to drive that whole picture to where it's just another key component of our whole PSM program.
Just in the interest of time, we have a great representation here. We have chemicals represented, we have refining, we have mining, as well as power. Do the other gentlemen agree with the concept of the correlation between the two? And historically, we've had good success, and we're going to get there. Just say yes or no, or any comments you might have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we mine precious materials. We're pretty up there on security. You know, one of the things that really has stuck out to me, I've seen, is the risk equation that a few people have brought up. So we're quite familiar with that. That's the way a lot of the regulation is done in Australia. So to be able to take that and roll cybersecurity into that, you know, I think that's a good framework to follow along with the rest of safety.
Did you bring any gold with you?
I did not.
All right. Stan?
I already had 2 elephants worth of gold, is what he said in his presentation yesterday. That's a yearly production or something like that. So, I think as we move forward, certainly they're related, and all of us are taking proactive actions on those things. But in the end, how decisions are made and how we implement changes it's going to be a risk-based decision. Yeah. I'm totally aligned with you on that. Is what is the real risk, and also it's going to be consequence-based decisions. Companies are running very lean. They have decision points on different things, different efforts that they're putting in terms of personal safety, process safety, reliability, and where does this fit in that realm? And sometimes it takes a wake-up call to the industry, kind of like some recent events that we've seen in the news. And even, I think it was last weekend, the Houston Chronicle featured an article on this very topic and potential breaches. So unfortunately, our industry sometimes learns from its mistakes. So until there's a price that's paid, it may take a while for this to evolve in the path that we'd like it to. So.
Excellent. We also have a good representation from multiple continents and regions. So we have Middle East from Bahrain. Todd, the next question is for you. Is there the same level of awareness in the Middle East around cybersecurity as we see here in North America?
Probably not, but it's definitely growing. The company that I work for did get hacked. We had a bit of a data breach 2 years ago. It was a real wake-up call for everybody. Nothing in the control system was affected, thank God. But the business was seriously impacted by it, even down to the telephone exchange, having a digital telephone exchange that people couldn't even call each other to find out what the hell's going on. So yeah, it's definitely, the awareness is picking up. There's a lot of cyber threats in the Middle East now. A lot of them are regionally based. A lot of it is religiously regionally based, so that even gets more complicated. Yes. But it's definitely growing.
So just for reference, the last couple of threats or actual breaches. Triton was in the Middle East, the Triconic system that was breached. There was also a major breach at Saudi Aramco, which is public, this is public information, 2012. 30,000 computers were affected, and people were running around literally pulling cables, pulling Ethernet cables out of walls. Next question is the level of maturity of cyber vis-a-vis safety. And I want to direct this to Julie because you have been down both paths of the teams that we have worked with. You've probably known this path the longest, last 7 years or so.
I would say from a process safety standpoint, we are certainly further along than on the cyber side. I think that fundamentally the reason for that is change agents come in different forms. And the change agent for safety is typically an incident. We all have had something happen at a plant or somewhere that has forced us to look at safety differently, and that's allowed us to make the changes that we have today in our safety programs. It's truly a cultural change within our company specifically that we learn safety at the office and we take it home with us. Now, cyber, on the other hand, we're fortunate. We haven't had that change agent of an incident. We do have the benefit in the utility market of having NERC-CIP. Now, I don't necessarily always say that the standards are a necessarily great thing, but there are a lot of positives about having that regulation because those have been the change agents for us to have to look at cyber in a different way, much like we had to from a safety standpoint. So we are further up the maturity model than many. Some of our larger plants are actually much further up that maturity level than some of our smaller plants, and that's because of the focus we've had on the industry as far as the standards themselves. Again, I really emphasize the fact that it's a culture, and safety is going to go from the office home, and I really think that with the way that cyber is, it's going to go from home to the office, because the more incidents that happen externally, we certainly want them to be external from us, but the more that happen externally, the more the awareness is there, and the more the education is there, and then we can actually blend those into our processes as they come inside the offices.
Excellent, thanks. Aidan, I'd like to follow up with you, just answering the same question I asked Todd. Is there that same level of awareness and concern in Australia as we see elsewhere around cybersecurity?
Yeah, it's an interesting question actually. Look, I think on the IT side of things, it's actually quite similar around the world. But when you get into the cyber side of things, I think we're really only just starting to open up our eyes in that area. And something that our government's actually making some serious moves towards, establishing AusCert and establishing some regulations. And it's not something that we typically do. So it's something that's coming on quite fast. But at the moment, it's quite new.
Very good answer. A question that just came to me as a follow-up, not on this list. When we talk about zero accident, that's a goal. It's something we aspire towards. But invariably, anytime you walk up to a process plant or a chemical plant of any sort, you see number of hours since last incident. Unless it says since the beginning of time or the start of plant. Zero accident is an inspiration. Should we aim for zero security incidents? And is that a reasonable expectation? Let me start with Todd because he has a long history of process safety management and zero incident.
I think we should. My personal belief is that everything is preventable. I grew up, my father's in the safety business, so I grew up with it, everything is preventable. When it comes to how do you do it, that's the devil. The BAPCO has just passed 17 million hours without an injury of any kind. We're approaching 20 million hours now,
awesome.
Which is a huge accomplishment. We know we can do it, and I think the experts in this field know that they can do it with cyber. It's the devil's in the detail, but I do think it's attainable.
So a follow-up to that question, which is part of the question, it would be an answer to one of the questions, that what poses the greatest risk to process safety and cybersecurity? So what is the number one enemy in your view? Julie, you seem like you have an answer.
I'll take it. Two things. One, to your previous question, within Southern, our focus on safety began with Target Zero. That was our culture. And we had the same question on safety that you just posed to this panel of, well, is that really unattainable? And it drove us in a direction in safety that became a cultural direction. So I absolutely agree with that on the cyber side, that it's really about the culture and what you're trying to drive, and not necessarily about is it immediately attainable. Now, from a standpoint of what's the biggest risk, I think connected devices are the biggest risk. I think they're the biggest opportunity we have, and it's great technology advancements, but I also think it's probably our biggest risk. When we look at our safety systems today, and we have a lot of protection, asset protection, obviously, in a utility facility, but the more connected devices that you have, the more safety is having to look at it from an external source. We've always focused on safety within the fence, within the plant, and we've not had to worry about so much that what is that cyber portion that could come in and manipulate a system, a configuration, or a safety system itself, and cause a safety incident. Now it's a lot of focus because it's safety, but safety, the whole complex of safety has changed now because there is that cyber perspective.
A different way of putting it, maybe this is what you were saying, maybe not. In safety, what you deal with is within the confine of the process plant or the power plant, and the action of your people is what determines your safety. In security, you have an enemy from the outside who is trying to also cause problems. Is that?
It is, but I also think that outside proponent is now impacting even your own safety systems themselves, because we've never had to look at safety in that manner. It was the safety of the associates, the safety of the equipment, and now there can be a cyber impact to those same systems based on connected capabilities.
Stan, do you have something to add to that?
You know, whether it's personal safety, process safety, or cybersecurity, the role of an individual person is huge, right? Personal safety, let's take an outage, for example. You got several thousand contractors converging on your site. Your line of defense, in many cases, is that point of contact with that outside person, bringing them up to speed on your rules and procedures and oversight. Process safety, well, let's take security, for instance. Security, this may be a bad statement, but I'm not going to prohibit anybody from really going in and doing damage to my site. We can put up barriers, we can try to discourage it, but in the end, the best line of defense that we have, if somebody's viewing our plant, is an employee reporting that person. On a cybersecurity, you know, I was talking to some of our IT leaders in the company, and the thing that they're most worried about is an outside vendor coming in when we have all these connectivity issues and pulling that flash drive out of their pocket, or some sort of interface that occurs where they're bypassing some layers of protection.
So my twins are in 10th grade. We just had an incident, cyberbullying, and somebody reported it, and the school put out a notification to every family to pass on to the kids. See something, say something. Is that what you're saying? Have your people be the eyes on contractors or anyone else, be each other's peers?
You know, raising the level of awareness. We do a lot of campaigns in our company. A couple examples of that, and I'll be brief, is one, every employee has a this is phishing button on your email.
Yep.
So an email comes in. I got one the other day from my son. And it was not from trust me, my son's not communicating with me. Especially at his age, he's busy doing other things. So I like hit my little phishing button. Sure enough, it was a phishing attempt.
That's great.
Right? So they put those layers of protection in there. And the other thing is just raising the level of awareness on those types of issues with your employees. Embarrassingly enough, we had a United Way campaign about 6 years ago. And so when we were putting together these little packets for all of our employees, and we went out and we got these Chevron Phillips branded flash drives. Well, because of our awareness, one of our guys from our I&E group, he went back to the shop and he scanned it, and it had malware on it. We were going to hand this out to everybody in the plant.
That's amazing.
You know, so I mean, there's many ways to get around, but we got to raise awareness with people.
Absolutely. Chad, just a question for the three gentlemen on this end. What do you consider to be the greatest threat of cybersecurity? If you were to name one thing, the greatest threat or risk to cybersecurity?
Yeah, I think it continues to be insider threat, and it comes back to cultural awareness and things of that nature. And so one of the great things we've seen is we have an awesome board of directors that's very cyber aware, and so they've actually been requesting and pushing things down from the top, which is creating greater and quicker effectiveness in changing that culture. Whereas for years we were trying to educate upwards, and it was very difficult. It was a challenge. And so seeing that shift and that change, we're beginning to see now that people are starting to question things. And actually had an operator call me about a month ago saying, look, we kind of saw this weird thing. You don't know if it's anything to do with cyber, but and that never happened in the past. So it would take. They'd change out instruments. They'd call out the vendor. They would go through maybe a month before anybody ever caught word that something weird was going on that may have a cyber impact. So we're starting to see that culture change now, and it's being driven top down.
Aidan?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we struggle with in this area particularly is the remote access. Right? So one of the great things that digital has brought is I can have a guy from Sweden log in, world expert in the mill, and fix it, right? But even if we have the best cybersecurity standards in our company, in our plant, he's a trusted vendor with us. How do I know that his security is good? How do I know that everything he's doing is right, or he's got the graduate in giving it a crack? So that border that you're used to having, you mentioned the fence at the gate of your plant that you're used to having that border. Well, that border shifts as you engage with other companies.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Todd?
My personal, I really can't add a whole lot to what they've said, but the only other thing that I would say is the executive management awareness of the problem. I see that as a great threat.
That's an excellent point. I used to not get it, but thanks to Jason Howard-Grau, is he here, and his team, I get it now because they started phishing me about a year ago. I'm dead serious. They started targeting our ELT members, executive leadership team, specifically, and I was one of the last. I hadn't been tricked. I finally did click on one, so it's the best way to educate your executives. Target them and tell them ahead of time. Make it a fun activity. Hey, I'm going to target you. I'm going to show you how even you can make that click and put us at risk. Excellent point. So
From my son.
don't open an email from Stan's son. So internal threat from Chad, external tunneling in through remote access and the executive leadership team. On that last one, I'm just going to go home and take the rest of the day off. Anyway, so given the deep system knowledge demonstrated in the Triton attack, what are you doing to prepare for the next attack? Let me start with Stan at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. We have an ICS cross-functional security team who they have representatives from each site. They're looking at the latest and greatest technologies. I specifically asked them also the question of had we been breached, and they said no, but I couldn't share it if we had. So read into that what you want. So, but we've had a pretty good system. The other thing that we've done to help prevent in the future is we have incorporated this into our whole operational excellence structure. So when we have periodic internal, external audits, it's all worked into that structure. It's part of that auditing. We have an independent ICS systems audits put in place. It's kind of a proactive look. We have inventoried every piece of associated equipment in every site, and that is part of the audit. And there's a certain frequency that we feel comfortable with of going in and auditing, make sure we got the latest software, patches, security loaded on those types of machines. So taking a proactive approach and just a lot of awareness and communication.
Specific to Triton, do you guys use safety systems in your environments?
Yes.
What
yes.
do you guys do? Julie?
Regarding the security of it?
Specific, did that change the awareness? Triton, by the way, created probably the biggest reaction that we saw from our perspective from the industry, executives and others, was Triton of recent times, because it was one of those thresholds that hadn't been crossed. Did you do anything after that came out? Did you guys take any action, anything differently from the way you were doing things before?
I'm not going to say we really did anything different because we really still had that. We were kind of ahead of the game from a standpoint of patching and knowing what you have. You can secure what you know you have. So it's ensuring that you know what devices are out there and taking that security posture. I will say that that and other events really have led us to design for safety. You mentioned it a bit in your processes, and we have a culture of design for safety. We've taken cyber because of incidences like that and put that in as part of that product delivery process, so that design process where we actually are reviewing our designs from a cyber perspective, not just from a safety perspective. So I think that would be something that would be over and above some of the traditional things that we continue to do. We do have a very solid kind of outside in and inside out approach because we do have that boundary to our control systems. And so, again, I think that after an event like that, it forces us to look a bit more on the control side and ensuring that we're fully utilizing tools that we have from a monitoring perspective so that we can really understand what might be there, not what's coming in. We have a pretty mature environment for that, but more or less what may have come in, such as the Triton event, but what may have come in and using those from a metric standpoint to make sure we're fully utilizing the tools.
Thank you. Chad, did Triton create some conversations after it hit?
Absolutely, and it was a very good conversation because in the past, before we had deep inventory of our systems, if something came up or there was some, ICS cert alert that was of significance, our only methodology was shotgun approach, right? We'd kind of send out mass emails to everyone to see if anyone knew if they had that. And with turnover rate, sometimes you had engineers supporting facilities that may not have even fully understood all the equipment they had, and much less firmware versions or anything of that nature. So, you generally get a lot of silence. You wouldn't get any response. And so now having deep inventory, actually very quickly, our board wanted to know,
how many Tricon systems you had?
And very quickly, we were able to provide those answers very surgically
This
where
is
they existed.
shameless plug-in, but where did you get that information from?
Cyber integrity.
I was told by a few people not enough about products in this conference, so I couldn't resist that one.
This was not a paid commercial.
To that end, this is an absolutely true story. I was at S4 in Miami Beach, and I had a conversation from a security director at one of the major oil refineries. And this is the story he passed on to me. As he said it was, yes, one of our executives asked, how many of these systems do we have and where are they? So I sent an email to all the sites, the DCS administrators, control system administrators, asking them how many of these do we have. And they came back and said we have them at 4 sites. But then we found out that Triconix is the standard SIS system throughout all of our 12 refineries. And every one of the 12 have them. So either he didn't get a response from the other 8, or they didn't know that they had Tricon systems. So how can you protect something? Even after an incident like that, you say, no, I don't have it. So really bad situation. Did Triton create a conversation within the mining industry?
Yeah, it did, but I think maybe not to the same level as we've seen in the in the refining and those sort of industries. I think it's still something that we're still building a capability around, and expanding that awareness of just what is possible.
Excellent. Todd, how about in the Middle East?
Very much so. We have nothing but Triconix systems, so it was pretty close to heart. One of the things that we refocused on was what needs to be connected. One of the panelists talked about connectivity. We've pretty much eliminated anything getting into our business network that doesn't need to be there, including contractors. They can't get into our business network, including PAS. We have PAS on site. They can bring their laptop in, but if they want to connect, you connect to external Wi-Fi. So we're trying to do as much as we can to keep everything as segregated as we can, and really looking critically at what needs to be connected.
Excellent. Thank you. This next question is if an incident happens and it is internal and it's inadvertent, a control engineer puts a triconic system in bypass and forgets to take it out of bypass. Things go wrong. 2 weeks later, proper conditions come for an incident to occur whereby the safety system would be there to protect you, but it's not there to protect you. It's a yes or no answer. Is that a cyber event? Internal, inadvertent mistakes.
No.
I would say no.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to make an observation. I've got two people who have extensive security background, and I'm going to make an assumption. You guys are operations and safety?
Which one of us got the right answer, though?
I'm going to have to go with the security guys. Wrong! I've been dying to do that for Mark Carrigan. Anybody familiar with the McLaughlin Group? McLaughlin Group. Oh my God. Nobody watches PBS? Well, long time ago, in the 80s. Wrong! You know what I'm talking about, Stan.
So, Eddie, maybe one thing to bring up there, though, is even though I said that's not a cyber incident, we would investigate that, and we do actively investigate that in our operations. And we actually bring that in through the safety forum, through process safety.
Excellent. Let me put a little spin to it. How about this guy did it on purpose? He actually wanted to cause an accident. Would you consider that a cyber event?
No,
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Just bear with me. Just bear with me. What if this person...
You're going somewhere.
I am. What if this person had malicious intent and was a contractor who came from the outside and did this? Made a configuration change to your DCS. He pretended to be from XYZ, and he is your X. Actually, what happened with the Stuxnet? He's a contractor who is qualified to work on your system. You have had a long-term relationship. The supply chain, his office gets affected or infected, and he comes in and plugs in the thing, and he's innocent. He's just carrying somebody else's virus. It's a cyber incident. So why wouldn't an inadvertent change be considered cyber? They did the same exact thing. I'm not here to convert you, just to make you think about it and take it back.
You didn't ask for our answer.
Oh, your answer.
I was a yes on that one.
So what's the difference? Does intent make it different? The mechanism. An authorized person went in and made a change. One was a contractor with malicious intent. One was one of your people, totally innocent, totally inadvertent. Just didn't go through the right process, being reminded that I got to go back and switch that back on. So let me see what else I have here. We'll get to some Q&A here in a minute. How do you compare your level of visibility into risk between safety and security? Let's start with you.
They're inextricably linked. There's no difference between the two.
Yeah, I think they're quite well linked as well.
Are you asking the current visibility, or how do we view it?
Visibility into risk between safety and security. I think what you answered was the importance of it. They're both very important. So 2 questions. Importance as well as what can I see from a cyber standpoint versus safety standpoint, risk-wise?
Right. Yeah. I think, definitely they're related, but I think that it goes back to really being able to understand your environment to know what to look at. So from a safety perspective, over time and through experience, we know what things to monitor and track and follow. And like I said, we can even kind of predict when safety conditions are getting to where we may expect an incident, so we can ramp up communications to make sure that, in a shutdown bubble or something, we can address that. So I think it's the same thing with cyber. We just need to hone in and really understand our assets so we know what to watch so that we can have those indicators.
There's a question in here. I don't like the way it's stated because it's trying to push PIS's solution. I'm going to ask it differently. I got to be fair. I'm going to ask it differently. Can you assure safety in your plant if you have contractors walking around and the contractors and your people are your assets, but you don't know they're within the plant, within the process? That is, you know about 20% of them are out there, 20% of your people are out there. Can you assure safety that way? And if that's the case, did you account for every person? I'm screwing this up. I think I'll go back to the question as it was said. Sorry, David Zahn. I'll read your question. Yeah, for next time. We talk about lack of visibility into 80% of the assets in a plant, cyber assets. I/O cards, controllers that you can't see from the process control network. There's just absolutely no way to see that. How does this impact the maturity of a safety and security initiative or system?
I kind of like the way you asked it from the people question because to me, it's a matter of segregation of duties. Mm-hmm. So, even when we have large volumes of contractors on site for work, physical work, typically we have, designated supervisors of people that are kind of overseeing and watching those activities. So it's a matter of making sure that, they have only the access they need to certain areas and that they're, if they need to be escorted from one area to another, that takes place. So it's the same thing with cybersecurity. If we're going to bring contractors on site, it needs to be an escort procedure and there needs to be segregation of duties, that there's only so much that they can do and that's a limitation. We build that into our systems up front so that we can kind of limit that risk.
Looking 3 years out, just put your visionary scopes on, do you see greater relationship, greater communication, all the way to emergence of HSE, health, safety, and environmental, with security to some extent? Let's start with Todd.
I think you have to. It's a question of how you get there. For us, I know that for sure. As I said, we do a lot of segregation, like segregating as much as you possibly can. There needs to be more visibility. There's great visibility around safety metrics. There's not like physical safety metrics. There's not great visibility around cyber metrics.
That's very good.
Yeah, I think that's something that's going to come in, and I think it's really going to come in with the safety side of things, especially for us. This risk equation that we talk about, the consequence and likelihood. This is another sort of risk. It's no different to someone coming and breaking into our gold room or coming and burning down a building or that sort of thing. It's another form of risk, and I can see it would, as the awareness grows, it will form into that platform.
Is there really a gold room?
Oh yeah.
Wow. Chad?
Yeah, that's definitely our vision and the direction we're headed in, and again, it's a process to get there. But I think that today, if we look at any plant side change, it's always going to have an environmental sign off by an SME, and it's going to have a sign off by someone in safety because that's our culture. And I think we're going to get to the point where cyber is going to be a piece of that. That it's not just going to be someone at a plant site level that has a minimal understanding of cybersecurity. Will have to be a subject matter expert to make that call whether or not it's going to have impact and change the company.
Yeah, I think that as we said, I believe that we're going to continue to, from a cultural standpoint, continue to merge those two from a cyber and a safety position. I think those that saw Harvey's presentation this morning, we really do have that 2 to 3 year vision now of that health desk, if you will, and that really understanding what those cyber metrics are and understanding how we can take a proactive approach, which is exactly what we learned from safety, that we're now applying it. It's much easier for our business to understand that process and bring the cyber into that same process versus holistically give them another process so that we're forcing them in two different directions versus forcing them towards the same process. So we're absolutely headed that way.
Stan?
I'm conditioned to say yes. I'm going to blend this into the trick question you almost asked us. I think that's an interesting question, though you didn't finish it, is our level of assurance and our confidence and assurance. I could flip that question back to you. Can you assure me that you're going to get from point A to point B in Houston every day this year? in your car safely, right?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, and it's kind of the same question. So then I could follow that question up as, what measures do you put in place to increase your probability of success? I got a young teenage driver that's getting down the roads of Houston right now. We're mandating that she takes only certain routes. It's just to cut her risk down. We can't take her off the road. There's a level of risk that we tolerate. And that's what we're doing in our company right now, is we're understanding our hard and our soft risk, and cybersecurity is rolling up the page into the hard risk. It's real. It's very, very real. And I have no assurances that someone in our plant can just run out and cause a cyber incident. It's a little bit difficult for them to do. And one of the takeaways as a manufacturer and operator of plants that I'm taking away from this conference is, okay, we just went through a freaking 51 inches of rain hurricane, right? And our operators and craftsmen figured that out. Who would have expected that kind of event? One thing I'm taking away from this is, okay, we got to start running those scenarios where somebody has a major breach, and how do we get the system shut down? Even if it's manually, how do we do that? And then certainly there's many tools of which you provide that we can look at and see if that can make that process easier for us.
Absolutely. So that whole notion of capturing the entire inventory of your system becomes really, really important. Let me go back to a comment you made earlier, because I think it is critical to this conversation. And you said you believe you have 35 plus years of experience in the refining industry, 37. You made the statement that every accident is preventable, and you believe that. Why?
Why? Because that's the way I was raised. Set your goals.
By the way,
set
I
your
believe
goals
the
high.
same.
Set your
I
goals as
believe
high
the
as you
same.
can.
I believe the same. I'm not challenging you. I want you to put some parameters around it, because I believe security is the same way. We had a conversation earlier with one of the editors here. I made a claim around that topic, and I believe that all security events can be preventable. But why? Like safety, all security events could be preventable. We should aim for zero security incident. Why do you believe all safety accidents could be preventable? Stan, you want to take a shot at it?
That's kind of a tough
Yeah, we say it all the time. Have you ever been to a plant that didn't have a zero accident goal? They all have it. And if it's not possible, you shouldn't say it. The first rule of leadership, don't set goals you can't achieve, except for your sales department. Neil, sorry.
So I think it's something that we have to believe in. It's like, do you want to give up hope? I don't want to give up hope. I want every employee committed to a zero accident philosophy. But where we're taking people is, again, we're going back and refocusing on risk, driving down probabilities. And you can't drive that probability to zero. So if you're trying to say those two statements are equivalent, then we got a conflict.
No, I
Right?
didn't say.
I know you
I didn't
didn't.
say it's achievable. I said it's a goal that you should aim for. But why do we say that it's possible? I didn't say achievable. I say it's possible. Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
We've recently introduced something where we're all familiar with safety standdowns. We've had safety events, we've had safety problems. We see a trend that we don't like, and we'll stop work for 25 minutes or half an hour, and let's talk about this. One of the things we've recently introduced was safety success standdowns. So rather than after an event or after a series of events, we're celebrating and reinforcing what we've achieved. I don't think many companies do enough of that. I'm sure some do. But the response to that has been just absolutely overwhelming. It's like people are just like, oh, you know, they really get that you care about them because of the way that's conveyed. It's not not a lagging indicator. It's a leading indicator, and people buy into that. So if you could get that same type of mentality into cyber, You know what I mean? I think that would make it achievable.
So let me add a little light to why I believe that. I believe we affect and we try to control, especially you control freaks, process control people, we try to control our environment. To that end, if you look at all incidents, whether cyber or safety, somewhere a human being failed to do what they were supposed to do. There was a ASM consortium many years ago that did a study around root causes of incidents, and they attributed 42% of all incidents to human error, the other 36% or so to equipment failure. Jack was a member of that consortium, and the rest was process. So we had process, equipment, and people. And the question that I have is, why does equipment break? Does equipment decide to break, or does it break because some human being designed it wrong, some human being didn't maintain it properly, or operated it incorrectly? How many of you consider lightning, strike of lightning, taking out a server or putting fire to an environment, act of God in your incident reports? Yes. Do we not know how to prevent lightning? We know how to prevent lightning. So somewhere the system failed. You didn't put in the proper lightning rod. You didn't maintain the high gauge wires that go to ground that lightning rod. So the human failure is somewhere along the way. Finally, where does error come from? Error comes from two sources: error of commission, error of omission. You either leave the door open for the bad guys to come in, or you open the door for the bad guys to come in. Or you never put a lock on the door. That's omission. Or you open the door. You never put in your firewalls. You never take the inventory of your system. You don't do your vulnerability management. You're leaving the door wide open. You have a locked door, but your guy goes up to the website, clicks the wrong click, and downloads some virus. You open the door and let the bad guys in. Agree or disagree? Yes or no? Yes or no?
Yes.
What am I agreeing to?
Humans are ultimately, we have to take responsibility. Why is this so important? It's so important because if we don't take responsibility for it as human beings, then we can say, oh, it was act of God.
Just to comment on the goal of zero. Another way to look at that is we call them goals, but it's really a mindset, right? So if you have the mindset that you can have zero incidents, zero injuries, then you're going to design to the right solution. And then when you do have an incident, then you're going to do the rigor to figure out why it failed so that you redesign and give it your next best effort at mitigating that. But if you don't shoot for zero, then there's another thing you allow in, which is complacency.
Yes.
And that will eventually lead to an incident.
We have to take responsibility. It's time to take some questions. I know, Hank, you have a question. Will you give a mic to Hank? And then Juan from BP.
I'd like to challenge your last statement.
Okay.
I think we've all seen the diagrams, when you talk about an accident and you got these Swiss cheese diagrams and you get the holes lined up in the right arrangement by some set of circumstances and all your layers of protection go away and something bad happens. And I understand what you're saying loud and clear about people doing things that they shouldn't do that could affect cybersecurity. But I'd argue that in a cybersecurity scenario that someone else is moving the slices of cheese.
Absolutely.
I think it's a different situation because it's not just a matter of circumstances lining up in a direction where something bad can happen. We've all seen that and we've all analyzed those kinds of events. But this is a situation where someone is actively involved in trying to change those outside of our direct control. So I would argue that it's a different scenario and it may not be possible to achieve or I'm certainly aim toward zero, but it
Yep.
may not be possible to achieve zero.
That's an excellent point, and the whole purpose of this conversation is to challenge and say provocative things to get some reaction out of you guys. You know, Mark Carrigan gave me the same argument about an hour ago. I'm not kidding you. I made that absolute statement that it is ultimately human error that causes an accident, and therefore it's ultimately human error that caused a cybersecurity event. He started debating me exactly on what you said, and I yelled. You have an outsider that's taking a shot with you. It's guerrilla warfare. How do you fight guerrilla warfare? You can't. Thank you.
Can I address that for a second?
Yes.
So I think that's why it's important that we start to take security and we bring it into like the PHA process and things of that nature. Because typically when we do that, we have multidiscipline. So you have everything from an operator to someone who's in IT to someone who's in safety and environment. So you have different focal points, different points. I mean, I can't tell you how many projects I've been on, and we're all sitting there and we think we have this great technological solution, or we have the process design and it's just so robust, and then we bring in an operator who has 30 years of experience, and in 2 minutes he crashes it because he thought of some other scenario that somebody in our focus group didn't quite pick out. So I think it's important, bringing security into that PHA process to have multidiscipline, even if they don't have any understanding of what they're looking at, just some other point of view to get out of that alignment of thought, because that's what hackers look for. They're looking for the things that nobody else is looking for. They're looking for that it was never intended to be used that way. That's where hacking came from. It wasn't a bad term originally. It was a good term. It was trying to make things more efficient and better and finding new purposes for things. And that's the point of view that you need to start looking at these security issues from.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next question. Juan?
Yeah, I had a comment. I'm Juan Munoz with BP. My comment was related to the PHA process and how we can incorporate digital security into that process. And I think it is key that we think in that direction, because that allows us to concentrate on the high priority, on the main risks that we have, right? When we run the LOPA for a process, right, we calculate the probability of failure of a specific piece of equipment, and based on that, we put together layers of protection that can protect us against a specific threat.
Question, please.
Yeah, so the question is, with all of that, do you think that we should go ahead and use the same PHA LOPA process for digital security systems?
Julie, you want to
Yeah,
comment?
I mean, absolutely. I think that's kind of the direction that you've heard up here, is that unless you bring that into that entire process, your design for safety, your design for cyber, your PHA process, you're going to have a disconnect, and you're not going to be able to, when someone does come in, you're not going to have the functionality that may deter that based on the functional design.
So what does LOPA do? LOPA prioritizes what's important for you. And if everything is important, nothing is important. The same goes for cyber. You assign it by controllers, and then you assign it for business, for process units. I imagine in a refinery, a reactor, in a fluid cat cracking unit, has a little bit more importance than your cooling tower. And you'd want to give priority. Next question, please. Let's start with Jack, closest to you.
I need to preface my my question with the statement that Eddie did not pay me to ask this question. Okay? So
Jack is my uncle, by the way. Not really.
where does the money for cybersecurity come from?
Ah, that's an excellent
$64
question.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I was talking about earlier about getting the executive part of the organization to really understand the threat. If they can get it, I like your example is just send some spear phishing at you, then you can get money for it. I'm sure. I'm absolutely convinced of that. I look at it the same way as alarm management. So what are you saving by the $1 million you're going to spend on alarm management? Well, it's future cost avoidance. Okay, well, how do you quantify future cost avoidance?
How did you, or how are you planning to justify expenditure on ICS cybersecurity?
Look, honestly, I couldn't have said it better. I think that's really it. You need to build this awareness at the higher levels, at the people who are setting the direction of an entire company, not of a unit, not of a section. It needs to come from the executive level.
Executive level.
Right.
Chad, you
Build that
did it.
awareness.
You literally went through and got justification.
Yeah, so I think one of the things is we changed the view. We look at security. In essence, over the years, control systems have become more complex. They're much more capable. There's things we can do today that we couldn't do years ago. But if we don't put the security features in place to be able to take advantage of that, we're not able to extract the full investment that we've put in that control system technology to be able to transfer that shop floor data to the top floor. So, the way we conveyed it is security is actually the catalyst to enable us to take advantage and get full investment out of that very expensive control system environment in comparison to the security product. And we actually pulled off a miracle and had our IT function pay for our global project. So.
I know for the power industry, it's a regulatory requirement. You do it or you're not in compliance. How did you guys justify expenditure? Because you have gone far beyond what the compliance, NERC compliance wants. How did you justify that?
Far beyond. Well, I think that it did start with regulation. I mean, I think that that's been a benefit to us, but it's also been very strategic leaders. Harvey's mentioned several times throughout this conference just the vision that we have from a cyber perspective. But our understanding from our executives is very high. We get a lot of questions from our executives, and from the Tom Fanning and down. So we really do have while it may have started with the standards, we really do have a executive leadership that is committed from a cost perspective to drive us even in areas that we're running to keep up, if you will.
Excellent. Stan?
I think she said it best with that answer. Same way, we have a committed executive team. It's a clear and evident risk, and the proper resources are afforded to move forward.
So I want to just ask a quick question. One of our executives who's no longer with us, Chris Eulinger, used to say, safety is a license to operate. You violate it, you lose your license to operate. Is security a license to operate?
I believe it will be if it's not already.
Is security a license to operate?
In some ways, in our industry, it already is.
Is security a license to operate?
Absolutely, because as I say, I see security and safety as one function, basically.
Julie?
We try to look at it the same.
Stan?
Yes.
Twice. Unanimous yeses. Yeah.
Okay, it's more of a comment. I think it'd be remiss of us not to point out that the standards are also evolving and recognizing risk from a cybersecurity. And 61511, addition to Section 8, I know I'm sad, now mandates that when you're looking at your SIS, cybersecurity is part of your risk threat assessment.
Thank you. Thanks for the insight. Ian? Ian with BP upstream, downstream.
Well, upstream now.
Upstream
Yep,
now.
that's right.
What's downstream?
11 years in the downstream and now in the upstream. So yeah, the question is going back a bit to the HAZUP LOPA part of the argument. And it's really around one of the key things when you do LOPA, we inherently make an agreement that we have a TMEL, target mitigated event likelihood. And that is inherently saying that we expect this event to happen at some frequency. So that's the key point I'm making there is we want to target zero, yes. But if we think of going to HAZUP and LOPA type assessments, we have to agree that we are saying this thing is going to happen at some frequency. And it happening is actually not a bad thing. We should then analyze that, learn from it, and become better the next time.
And be prepared. One of the things that was really insightful from General Hayden's risk analysis, risk calculation, that was somewhat refreshing for me, was it had 3 elements. And consequences was one of them. Managing the consequences was one of them. The other 2 were threat and who wants to tell me what the first one was? Vulnerability.
Yes.
Vulnerability, threat. You don't have much control over the threats. Right. You have control over vulnerabilities and consequences. And what you're saying is you should expect that at some point thou shalt be breached. Be prepared to deal with it. Have your backup to recover from, etc. Very good.
So I'd like to follow up that a little bit. So okay, now we're gonna do a PHA LOPA, right? Who's sitting in the room?
So that's important, right? I mean, you want to get the right people in the room related to now cybersecurity when you're discussing this topic.
So you got to be willing to commit the resources to have them in that room to have that PHA LOPA, right?
Yes.
And one question that's going to come up is, have we been breached? Have we been breached in the last year?
So the question
have we been
typically-
breached in the last 5 years? Have we
Right.
been breached in the last 10 years, right?
And the question should be a bit broader than we. It should be around, has anyone in our industry been breached?
So that point is well taken, but that conversation might not occur like that, right? The challenge would be to look at it holistically, because if you just look at it internally, you could
Yeah.
drive that down. Well, that's zero probability.
Exactly.
It's
Yes.
off the chart,
Yeah.
right?
Which brings up the next follow-up question. Should the industry share information around security breaches? In fact, let me pose it in two parts. Should the industry share when there has been a breach? And has your company specifically been breached in the last 5 years?
Yes and yes.
Sir?
Yes, it should be shared in a controlled fashion, not publicly, and no, I'm not aware of us being breached.
Chad?
Yes, and no comment.
Julie? Well done, Chad.
It should be controlled, what is shared, and where it is shared, and no comment.
Okay, notice the two security people are the ones who are saying no comment.
I'm a
Very
utility.
good. Stan?
On the second one, I'm no comment as well. We typically don't share that information, but I like there's several forums where information is shared with the industry in a confidential fashion, right? And I think that there's potential for that.
Maybe in an anonymized way.
Yes.
A body of a
Yes.
government body or an association that can anonymize it.
Yes.
We run out of time. I understand it. 2 more questions. Or we can have the beer come in here and stick around. This is a very fascinating conversation. I'm having fun with it. Please stand up.
Craig Mateka, City Water, Light and Power. It actually goes in hand with what you just talked about. It's not really in the form of a question, but it's something that's thought-provoking. We talked about what is a cybersecurity incident. You asked if accidentally flipping a lever was a cybersecurity incident. My response to that would be it has to be evaluated by some standards, and then you make a determination. The reason why I bring this up is because being a part of the NERC SIP process as a power utility, there's some discussion about external-facing activity on your firewall, and if a hacker attempts to hack your firewall, and your firewall does its job and prohibits that, is that a cybersecurity incident? No, it's not, but there's discussion about all of that activity being reported back to the EISAC. They want to know it all, and that would be a huge burden. So it's just something to think about as you move forward. You ask yourself these questions: is how would I respond to that? What would be my response to that? And as a regulated industry, we're grappling with the standards body saying, "Hey, that would be overwhelming amount of work."
Thanks
That's
for
a
the
really
comment.
good answer, but you didn't have him pointing at you with a roll of paper.
Wrong. We have one more back there. You guys YouTube the McLaughlin Group. You'll love it.
Hello, I'm 32 years old, probably born after the digital age kicked in, but I have a very hypothetical question here. Let us say with all the knowledge and all the risk awareness that we have right now, we got a chance to go back to the future to prevent the advent of digital age. Would we go for that?
Oh, that's an excellent question. It's a question Greg asked me. Given that the internet, per General Hayden's talk yesterday, the internet was not designed with security in mind. Can the internet be made secure? Roughly, is that the question? If you had to do it all over, can the internet be made secure?
I think this question was related to would you undo what's been done? Is that what you're asking?
Okay.
Yeah. My simple answer is no, just based on the amount of knowledge that has really transformed the world as a result of the internet.
Excellent question. How about you?
Yeah, I think the answer would be no. I mean, we are pushing further and going further than anyone's ever gone before, right? We can receive things from people on the other side of the world in seconds. I think we would not.
Chad?
I would say no, because it's helping us sustain our world. It goes back to the beginning of time. If you've seen some of the early caveman movies, when they first discovered fire, fire is one of the most beneficial things we've ever had within our realm, when we can contain it and control it, it also can be very damaging, you know. So there's always going to be vices and virtues in everything we do, and it's just learning to manage and respect it and use it properly.
Excellent.
It's interesting. We ask ourselves that same question of if we were on the control side, digital controls versus analog controls, and we wouldn't go back. And I think it's just like you're saying, that it's a matter of how do we control it? How do we life cycle those things that it wasn't built into? How do we really put that type of emphasis on the control systems and the devices that we have, in lieu of just trying to put it on top of something that is older generation?
Stan?
I don't know about a question that comes from a guy with these lights shining,
know,
but it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
you're being interrogated. I don't want to look back. I'm just going to look forward. So
That's an excellent.
maybe
I love all
that's
the
a
answers
cop-out,
that I
but you gotta look
heard,
forward.
because I'm in the same boat with you. But I do want to go back and ask my question, which was a very insightful question that Greg asked. Can the internet be made secure? There's a trick about that question, I think.
Not as long as humans are using it.
I would assume that.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it's not about the technology. It's not about the internet, right? It's about the human factor.
It's like, how do you protect people from themselves?
Excellent question. My response was, how do you make highways safe? You can't make you could do better lighting, better traction, but at the end of the day, what you make safe are the cars, which are the servers on the network, are the cars on the highway, and the people who are driving those cars. You make that safe, you have a chance. You make your servers safe, you protect them, you put all the layers, you know what you have, and then train your people.
I think that goes back to a theme that we've seen throughout the conference, is you reduce the consequence.
Absolutely.
You minimize the consequences.
Absolutely. Thank
But
you.
it's autonomous driving, right? I mean, the only way you're going to get safe highways is fully autonomous driving. And the systems have to be good enough to support it.
Teslas.
If
So
Al
there is
Gore
a-
invented
More
it, he
question?
can make it safe.
Any more questions? We want to ask you a question, the 33-year-old who we think.
Sure.
So the question is, what do you think your 32 years would have been like had we not turned on digitalization?
I have no clue.
Thank you. With that, I want to thank you all so much for making this a, first and foremost, fun event. I've had a tremendous amount of fun. I've truly enjoyed it. I have a firm belief in life, and I preach that to our people all day, every day. If you're not having fun, do something different. And if I can't help you find fun at PAS, I will promise you I'll find you fun somewhere else. Life is too short. So first of all, have fun. This has been very enjoyable, and I've truly enjoyed it. And it's been very insightful. I have learned so much thanks to you. And this notion of technologies around safety, learnings from safety and security coming together is, I like it. By show of hands, let me see, run my survey again. Do they go together? Yes. And then I'd asked a question that was incomplete. I'd ask, would you like next year's optics to be a technology conference, a users group conference, and I'd left it at that, or both? Both? Excellent, excellent. So any final thoughts? Let me ask our esteemed and very experienced and very tolerant panel here to put up with my corny jokes. Todd, let's start with you.
Actually, no, I don't really have any comments. And
Excellent.
Look, actually, the last comment about cars really brought something to my mind, right? And that's the importance of us learning over time, right? Could you imagine today someone says, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to bulldoze this land flat. We're going to put people in metal cages doing 100 mile an hour. They're going to face opposite directions, and we're just going to tell them to go. We wouldn't do that today, right? But we've learned.
We've learned.
Yeah.
We've learned.
I just encourage everybody. I know it's sensitive sometimes how much information we can share with one another, but we're all trying to solve a lot of the same issues, and the more we can collaborate at a high level to work on common solutions and figure out how to do things, and then also continue to push back on our vendors to make sure that they're doing their part and making our jobs a lot easier at the shop floor. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks, Chad. Julie?
Yeah, I would reemphasize that as well because, even from the utility industry, when we talk about the regulations that we're under, there's not so far, and there are some coming, but there's not so far that same emphasis on our supply base. And so we can do a lot of things internally and it's consequence-based, but we still have to look externally for those that have connections to us and those that supply parts to us and really what are their postures. It's not so much just what our posture is, but it's how can we help ensure those postures as well.
Excellent. We still, after all, require contractors who come to our site be fully trained and certified. So very, very good point. Yes, Stan?
I'm just going to take my opportunity at the microphone to thank all of the PAS employees for such a fantastic, joyous, encouraging, fun, and
Can I ask
very
the PAS
informative
employees
event.
to stand up? I love these guys. These guys work so freaking hard. They're some of the smartest, hardest working people I've ever come across, and I'm very thankful to them for it. And I want to thank you for the fantastic conference that you have made possible, as well as the rest of you. Have a fantastic evening, safe drive back to wherever it is you're going, and please come back next year. I want to make one plug. Please sign up for next year. Get a couple of your executives to come give papers. If you get one of your executives, like Walter Pinto, who came here and gave a paper, a lot of you can come. We had the most participation from Lionel Bassell and then from Southern Company. Why? Because Walter thought this was useful. He came and gave a paper, and Harvey did the same. Get your executives, sign them up, especially if you have a female executive or an engineer. Please get them involved. We need to make this a very diverse group. The more diversity, the better. And you can make a difference. Let's make it better next year. Thank you.